Hey guys, it's Mackie. This is a quick 10-minute video to go over kind of some Pilates fundamentals. If you're new to Pilates, if you've never done it before, there's some terminology, there's some specific movements, some specific ways to do things that maybe you might not know. So we're going to start off first with kind of breathing, right? And Pilates breathing is really important, and there is a specific way that you were supposed to do it. So what we're focusing on is rib cage breathing. And that means that as opposed to breathing into the stomach, when you inhale, right, you can inhale and push your stomach out really nice and big, and exhale, let it go. As opposed to doing that in Pilates, we're really focusing on breathing into the ribs and breathing into the chest. So trying to keep the stomach low, close, right, and then opening up the ribs. So the best way to start by figuring out how to do that is to take your hands and place them onto your rib cage. Take a couple big breaths here and try to expand the ribs into the fingertips. Right, so it's a much more opening of the chest. And on your exhale, you want to think about closing the ribs. So pulling the rib cage towards the midline of the body. So take a big inhale into the ribs. Exhale, closing the ribs. 2 more times, big inhale. And exhale. Inhale, push the rib cage into the hands while pulling the belly button in. And then exhale, pull the ribs closed. So there's kind of 2 more aspects to this as well. In Pilates, we inhale in through the nose and exhale through the mouth. But as you breathe through your mouth, instead of just letting the air out, you want to purse your lips and kind of forcefully push the air out, almost like you're blowing through a straw. So it's an inhale in through the nose, nice and long. And then on your exhale, and empty the lungs of all of the air, right? So you can already start to feel kind of the core turn on as you forcefully blow all the air out. Inhale and exhale. Right at the bottom of that breath, you kind of start to feel that core engagement. So let's put that together with the rib cage. Big inhale. Exhale, purse the lips. Pull the ribs together. Nicely done. Okay, one last part to Pilates breathing. And that is kind of at the bottom of that breath, where you're sending your energy and where you're sending your belly button. At the bottom of the breath, you want to scoop the belly in, you want to pull the belly button back towards your spine, right? So it kind of goes along with the closing of the rib cage. You're pulling the belly button back. Along with that, you also want to lift up, right? So a lot of people talk about pelvic floor. For some people, that can be kind of confusing to understand. Your pelvic floor is essentially between the space between your anus and your genitals, right? It sits right there. And you want to pull up on that in order to engage the deep core muscles. If you're just starting out, that can be kind of confusing. So just picture in your mind a backwards L with the belly button, right? You're moving back with the belly button and up. So on your exhale, you pull in and you try to lift up out of the seat. So let's try to put that together. Big inhale and exhale. 2 more times. Inhale into the ribs. Exhale, purse the lips, pull up on the belly button and back. Good, 1 more time. Big inhale. Rib cage expands. Exhale, purse your lips. Pull the belly button back towards the spine and sit up off the mat. There's a really great creator on TikTok that talks about pelvic floor exercises and what it means to squeeze your pelvic floor. And she says it's like holding in wind and wee, which is a little graphic, but it is that feeling. It's that feeling of you trying to pull in and up to try and hold in we and trying to hold in win, right? So let's do that 2 more times. Inhale and exhale. 1 more time. Big inhale and exhale. And then ideally, you're breathing like this throughout your entire class, right? You're constantly pulling the belly button in, you're constantly breathing into the rib cage and pulling up and in, right? That's a lot to pay attention to. That's kind of the constant job, right? The constant work that we're doing, but that is essentially your Pilates breath. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the really big thing on swim Pilates, is this idea of the pelvic tilt and of imprint. So your pelvis, right, kind of sits right here above your hips in your waist area. And if we come onto all fours, onto cat-cow, we're probably very familiar with this tilt in this movement, right? As you tilt your pelvis down and you pull the tailbone up in cow, you then scoop the belly in and you tilt the pelvis back as the head comes down. So it's this back and forth motion, a little arch in the low back as the pelvis starts to tilt down, and then you pull the pelvis tilt up and the tailbone reaches down towards the mat. So I like to have people, especially if they're just starting out in Pilates, just practice back and forth, right? Inhale as you kind of create this little arch in the low back as the tailbone pulls up, pelvis tilts down. Exhale. Inhale and exhale. I also like to think about something that I was taught when I was learning Pilates, that when you think about tilting your pelvis forward, you're closing the difference between the difference in space between the hips and the rib cage, right? So notice how when you reach the pelvis backwards, it's almost like this front of the body is stretching. And then when you reach the pelvis forward, you're closing that space. So you're trying to get the ribs and the hips to connect. Let's do a couple more of these. Inhale and exhale. Pelvic mobility is super important. For women, also especially super important. Exhale. Let's do 3 more. Last 2. And last time. Nicely done. So when we talk about imprint then in Pilates, we're talking about tilting the pelvis back, right? And mostly this will come into play when you're laying down onto the mat. You'll have this little space kind of when you're in your neutral spine. A neutral spine just means where your spine normally sits, right? We naturally have a curve to our spine. So you're naturally going to curve up a little bit here when you're just laying down on the mat. When we say imprint, we're referring to pulling the hip bones back, tilting that pelvis back so the ribs and the hips connect, and pushing the low back down into the mat. So everything stays connected here. When do we use imprint? I cue imprint really only when both legs are up off the mat. And this is really to protect the low back. There are a lot of exercises in Pilates where you can kind of choose whatever feels more comfortable to you, being in neutral or being in imprint. I will always say imprint if we have both legs lifted, right? It's just more stability. It's less pressure on your low back when you have it arching up here, especially if we're starting to move the legs, right? Then we get that little instability in the pelvis. I always cue imprint and pull the belly button down and then lower. That is imprint and that's a neutral spine. And then the one last little thing that I wanted to go over is just this idea of internally and externally rotating your hips. I like to do a lot of hip work. I just feel like that really helps with posture and with spine, and I think that's a big part of Pilates as well. So oftentimes we're working with internally and externally rotating the hip and this disassociation from the pelvis. So instead of moving the leg and moving the pelvis around, we're trying to move the leg just through the hip. So internally rotating your hip is pulling the knee inward so the pinky toe kind of rotates in towards the midline of the body. Externally rotating your hip is moving so that the heel opens and kind of pushes towards the midline of the body and toes reach out. Oftentimes we'll be doing something where we don't want the pelvis to move back and forth. We don't want to move the whole body, right? We don't want to move all of the waist. We want to just disassociate through this hip so it's in and out. And that the hip socket can move freely kind of on its own. So these are nice ones if this is a new concept to you. This is a nice thing to do just to kind of get used to the idea of hip disassociation. And there you have it. All right. That was a quick little fundamentals of Pilates, just if you're new to it or if you really need to revisit the basics. Let me know if there's anything I didn't go over that you would like to see an explanation of. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, guys.